Welcome to the Wild Neighbors Speaker Series. I'm Jaya Torres, one of the information specialists with Austin Waters Wildland Conservation Division. We're happy to have Wizzie Brown of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service with us to talk about mosquito management today. This series is a collaboration with Travis County Natural Resources, who co-manages the BCP with us, the City of Austin's Wildland Conservation Division. So the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve provides an umbrella of protection for 2 migratory songbird species, 6 cave-dwelling invertebrate species, and 27 additional species of concern. You can check out these links to learn more about the BCP and how you can get involved. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's Wizzie Brown.
Thank you so much. All right, great. So we are going to cover the basics of mosquito management, which is a hot topic, especially now at this time of year with all the rain that we just got yesterday and the warmer temperatures. It's guaranteed that mosquitoes are going to be around this weekend and next week. So just a little background information, mosquito bites and habitats have been associated with humans and disease since ancient times, but they were actually formally incriminated in 1878 as the ones that are carrying these diseases and actually biting and transferring them. So they are the most important arthropod affecting human health, and they are often considered the deadliest animal in the world just because of the number of people that are killed by the diseases that mosquitoes vector. Mosquitoes are found in every region of the world except for Antarctica, and they have a very, very wide host range that they can choose from to feed on for the blood meal. So we have about 3,000 species of mosquitoes that exist worldwide, and about 174 of those species are in North America, with 85 of those species found in Texas. So there is no shortage of mosquitoes in our area. Mosquitoes have a complete life cycle. So that means they essentially have 4 life stages. They have an egg, several larval stages, a pupal stage, and then the adult stage. And the good thing about mosquitoes is that 3 of their life stages are in water or closely associated with water. And so all of this is going to start. The female mosquitoes are going to lay eggs either singly, as you see in the right-hand picture there, where they're kind of grouped together, or they can lay them in what's called a raft, where they are floating on the surface of the water, and you have this little kind of clump of eggs that are all attached together. And they don't lay their eggs all at once. They can spread the process out over several hours or even several days. And there's usually anywhere from 1 to 200 eggs that are laid in each batch of egg, and each female can lay up to 5 batches. So that you can just think about the math there. We can get lots of mosquitoes coming from 1 female mosquito laying eggs. Eggs are typically going to hatch within 24 hours if they are in water. There are other mosquitoes that they're called floodwater mosquitoes, and they lay their eggs close to where areas are that would get flooded when we have heavy rains or things like that. And so those eggs will lay dormant until they become wet, and then they hatch out. So these eggs are very resilient. They are able to survive desiccation or drying out, and they can be moved into other areas where they might not have been by being picked up by, animals or whatever. So after the eggs hatch, then we have the larval stage. There's going to be 3 stages in the larval stage, and these are called wigglers because of the way that they move around. So they're in this stage for anywhere from 8 to 10 days, so about a week. And these are the stage that actively feeds, and they're going to feed on organic matter that they found in the water where they are living, and algae, bacteria, and essentially they just use their little mouth parts to filter feed from stuff that lands on the surface of the water or stuff that's on the bottom or rocks that might be there. It just really depends on what container or surface or water, body of water that they're in. So this is going to be the stage that is easiest to manage because they are contained within that water space. And the water that mosquitoes are going to typically target for laying eggs and their larvae to grow in is going to be standing water that is not moving, that has that organic matter in it. So after the larval stages finish, we have the pupil stage. This is also in water, and these are going to be about 2 days development. And these are often called tumblers from the way that they move. You can see that they kind of have this comma-shaped body. This is the head up here. Here's the eye. And they have these little paddle tails. And they can use those paddles to push themselves through the water, but they kind of do this little somersault motion when they are in the water. And they do have an air sac. And there are actually sonic devices that they use in large mosquito control programs that in like boats and stuff that they can disrupt the air sac and actually cause those pupae to drown. And then the final stage is the only stage that is not in water or associated with water other than when the females lay the eggs. So we have the male and the females, and you can tell male mosquitoes from female mosquitoes because males are going to have really feathery looking antennae, and the females are not going to have those feathery antennae. So you can see the drawing on the right-hand side, but then you can also see the actual mosquitoes on the left-hand side. You can see the female on the right-hand side of that picture that has kind of the straight antennae. But then when you look at the male, they have those kind of feathery looking antennae. So as soon as the mosquito is done developing in that pupal case, it is going to take flight out of that pupal case as soon as possible because it needs out of the water. And at that point, their exoskeleton hasn't fully formed or hardened yet, so they can't have long flights. So they're going to hang around the area where they emerged from until that exoskeleton hardens. The females are going to mate one time. So essentially after they get that exoskeleton hardened, they are going to eat food, which in this case is going to be nectar. So that is a good thing about mosquitoes. They can be pollinators. So the first few days they're going to eat nectar, and then they're going to mate. And the females mate one time, males mate multiple times. And then once that female has mated, that's when she really becomes a problem because she is going to need the blood. So she has protein to produce the eggs. So common mosquito species that we deal with, Culex is one of them. These are kind of the brown tan mosquitoes that we see, and these are the primary vectors of West Nile. The probably most common one that we get here is the southern house mosquito, which is Culex quinquacephatus. I can never say that. And these are the ones that when people recommend that you avoid mosquitoes at dawn and dusk, these are the ones that they're talking about because these are typically active at that time. The Aedes mosquitoes, these are the black and white mosquitoes. They are the primary vector of diseases like Zika, chikungunya, dengue, and yellow fever. And these are different than the Culex because these are daytime feeders. And a lot of times they're going to feed around your ankles, but they're going to go for whatever skin is exposed. So we do have multiple species of Aedes. Common ones that you might see, we have Aedes albopictus, which is the Asian tiger mosquito. And if you look at the thorax on the Asian tiger mosquito, it has a single white stripe down it. Whereas if you look at the Aedes aegypti, which is the yellow fever mosquito, it has multiple stripes. We actually call it a lyre. So it's kind of like a heart shape, and it has that little curvature on the sides and then some stripes in the middle. So the adults, like I said, the females do require a blood meal. The males do not. They're only going to feed on nectar, but the females meal to produce eggs, and those are going to be blood of vertebrates. So it can be reptiles, it can be birds, it can be small mammals, it could be large mammals, but they are going to be some type of vertebrate. And then it takes about 2 to 5 days for that female to get the eggs prepared in her body and be ready to lay those after she's had that blood meal. So the mosquitoes are going to have flight periods. Like I said, the culex are what we call crepuscular. They're active in both the morning and the evening, so dawn and dusk. And then the Aedes mosquitoes are going to be daytime feeders. So those are the ones that if you're out working in the yard during the day, especially if you're under like shade trees or something, those are the ones that typically come and find you. So the of these, how far they can travel, is usually about 1.25 miles, so 1.24, almost a quarter. And they will locate their hosts by carbon dioxide that we exhale. They also can pick up odors of lactic acid and octanol, which are often used in mosquito trapping devices. There are also other odors as well. They also are going to be using visual cues, and that's usually when they get in closer to something. So they're going to look for dark, contrasting colors that are moving around. So that's when the wear light colored clothing comes in. And again, we're going to talk about dress later on. And of course, they're going to also be attracted to, they're going to be attracted to the body heat that is around that vertebrate host. So when they bite, they have this elongated mouth part that they use to puncture the skin of whatever they're feeding on. And the saliva that they inject is going to actually have an anesthetizing agent in it, which makes it so we can't feel that they're actually biting us. And they also have an anticoagulant in there that will actually prevent it from clotting. So usually when you realize that, unless you're looking at it, and when you realize a mosquito is biting you is when it's getting ready to fly away, because that anesthetizing agent goes away, and that's when you kind of start feeling it. So when you are having a mosquito bite, that itching sensation or swelling or any of that, that is actually an allergic reaction that people have to the saliva that is injected into your body. The other thing that you can have a problem with mosquito bites is possible secondary infections at the bite area. And that, you know, if you scratch and you're not washing your hands or whatever, you can get bacteria and stuff into that. And then of course, mosquitoes are also capable of transmitting disease or vectoring disease organisms into the animal that they're feeding on. And they can feed on multiple animals. So that's usually how things are transferred. They pick it up from one animal and they transfer it to another one when they're moving from host to host. So these are things like viruses that can cause things like West Nile virus or dengue or Zika, but they also have different things that they can cause. There are filarial worms. So a lot of people, if you have pets, you've probably heard of heartworm. That is actually transferred by mosquitoes. And there are parts of the world where filarial worms can be transferred to humans as well. It's obviously not here in Texas, so you don't have to worry about that. But there's also protozoans and other things. So it's not just us that we need to be worried about, but also sometimes our companion animals can have problems. Not only heartworm, but there's also a lot of equine encephalitis that can be transferred to horses and related animals to that. So you have to be very careful making sure that they get vaccinated for those things as well. So what can you do? Here are our 4 Ds. This is are really common thing that most people know about when we're dealing with mosquitoes. So the 4Ds are dress, dusk and dawn, drain, and defend. So dress, we want to wear our light colored, loose fitting clothing, long sleeves, long pants, making sure that we are covered up. And we want that light colored clothing so they don't have that dark contrast that they can see. Long sleeves and long pants to protect more of our bodies, of course. And loose fitting, because if you have something really tight, then they're going to be able to possibly bite through that. The dusk and dawn is obviously going to be for only certain types of mosquitoes. That's not going to work for the Aedes mosquitoes, but it definitely will work for the Culex. So dusk and dawn can be peak times. So if you're avoiding your main outdoor activities at dusk and dawn, you can reduce the chance of being bitten by certain types of mosquitoes. The drain, we're going to talk more about. Drain the standing water around your house, and essentially what you're doing there is you're reducing habitat for mosquito eggs, larvae, and pupae. And then, of course, we have defend, and we're going to talk about some mosquito repellents that are possibilities for you to utilize. So common backyard mosquito sources, there's a ton of them. So it does not take a lot of water to start a mosquito population. While you see a lot of these, we have ponds, we have neglected pools, we have the wagon and toys, tires, tree holes, gutters that are clogged, fountains, bird baths, trash bins that don't have lids on them, the water pots that have saucers underneath them. We have pet area or water pet dishes, low areas in the lawn. There's tons and tons of stuff, but it could be something as simple as you dropped a bottle cap on the ground and it landed so the inside part is face up and that collects some water. That is enough to start a mosquito population. So you can't just think, what are the big things? You have to think, what are all of the small as well? It doesn't take a lot. But this is something that I would recommend, especially now at this time of year, especially after the rain that we just got. It would be a good idea to go and look around your house and find out if you have any low-lying areas. Do you have any tree holes that need to be filled in? Do you need to do something with the pond, or do you have moving water or fish or something like that in there? Are your gutters clean? A lot of people, if they have debris built up in those gutters because you have trees overhanging them, that can hold water and it doesn't allow it to flow out. So go around your house and look for all those areas that you have water just sitting. And if it's going to be sitting there for more than 2 or 3 days, then it's really something that you need to think about and make sure that for the long term, you're going to take care of that, or you're going to empty it out at some point. So when we are managing the water sources, the larvae, draining the standing water is obviously really easy to do and doesn't really cost any money. You just go out, you find your standing water, and you dump it. So this could be things that are temporary, like refilling a pet water dish outside every 2 to 3 days is going to be enough that it's going to reduce that population for you. But when you're talking about a pond that is actually a landscape feature, then obviously you can't drain that every other day. So in that case, you would want to move to a different source of something. So you can use the Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis products. Those are known as BTI and commonly known as mosquito dunks, but they do come in not only the donut form, but also like little bits and stuff. And when you are applying that, those are only going to target mosquitoes and a few other water-dwelling immature flies, so things like midges and black flies. And with that product, you have to make sure that you read and follow the label instructions, because a lot of people think that they have to put in more than they do. It is based upon the surface area of the water, not depth doesn't play into it. You're just talking about the surface area. So make sure that you are looking at how much you, because of the surface area. Fish are another one. There are mosquito fish. The gambusia are the mosquito fish that are specific, and you can get those in various places in Texas. Other options, if you don't want to go with a specific mosquito fish and your pond is contained, then you can go get some goldfish or koi or something like that. That's going to be in there, but obviously you don't want to put those in waterways that may go and drain into some other location, because we don't want to spread around those fish to areas that they shouldn't be. The other options for the water would be applying oils or soap to disrupt the surface tension of the water. When the mosquitoes are breeding, they have this little tube that sticks off the tip of their abdomen, and it allows them to poke that up out of the surface of the water so they can breathe. So if you put water, or if you put soap on that, it's going to break, and so the mosquitoes can't stay at the surface to get a breath, and so they end up drowning. And likewise, if you use a oil product, they get that tube clogged up and they can't breathe, and so they end up dying. So I have a feeling somebody's going to put it in the chat. Can you use regular soap, or can you use regular oil that you're finding around your home or in your kitchen? Is it going to work the same way? Yes, it is, but we don't recommend that you utilize that. We recommend that you use the products that are formulated for this particular purpose. And when you use those products, not only have they been tested to be known to work, and it's going to give you instructions on how to utilize it, but it's also going to typically cost you less money. I actually did an experiment where I used, like, I think olive oil, because that's what I had on hand, and it killed the mosquito larvae that were in the area that I was trying to kill. But the cost of that versus if I just used the regular mosquito oil product was astronomical. So just keep that in mind. So when we are trying to reduce adult sites, the adult females are going to rest in usually thick vegetation. They want areas that doesn't have a lot of wind movement and that holds in moisture or humidity. So if you prune things back to allow air movement and sunlight in there, so foliage, cutting your grass and keeping that mowed, and then avoiding lots of ground cover in the area, is going to help to reduce the adults that are going to be hanging out in your yard and there for you to be bitten when you move outside. So as far as personal protection, again, we're going with the 4 Ds. We want that: avoid the dawn and dusk, the dress, wear loose-fitting, light-colored clothing. And then this one, we already talked about drain. And then this one is going to be the defend. So this case, we're going to talk about wearing insect repellent. So these are active ingredients like DEET, picaridin, IR 3535, and oil of lemon eucalyptus. Those are the ones that are recommended by the CDC to protect you against mosquitoes that can transmit or vector diseases to us. And we do have various diseases here in Texas. We still monitor for West Nile virus, pools and stuff like that. So DEET has been available since 1957. It has been tested thoroughly and known to work. Picaridin is another one that's been on the market for a while. It's been on the market in the US since about 2006 or 7-ish. And the EPA has an expanded grouping that so they have DEET, picaridin, they also have citronella on there, they have catnip oil, And then the CDC, they have added some new ones. They have the paramethanediol and then the 2-undecanone. Those are products that aren't as common as DEET and picaridin, but they are also on that kind of list of products that you can use. So you can look if you have questions about repellents, which I'm sure you do because most people do. There is the EPA site right here at the bottom that gives you a general overview of insect repellents. And then up at the top of the screen, there's actually a link to a site that allows you to put in different qualifiers, and it will kind of direct you to the right repellent for you. And it's talking about, you know, what type of area you're going into, as well as your activity level, because choosing a repellent and a percentage really has to do with, are you going into your backyard or are you going hiking in the woods? That's two different areas that you're going to go into. How long are you going to be out there? Are you going to be out there for 30 minutes or are you going to be out there for 4 hours? That would play into something. The other thing is going to be your level of activity. Are you going to go out on the and enjoy a glass of lemonade so you're not doing a whole lot, or are you going to be hiking and sweating a lot, and that sweat's going to cause that repellent to break down more rapidly? So those are all things that you really need to take into account when you're choosing an insect repellent for your area and activity. And so that's what that EPA site at the top is going to help you figure out. So there is a difference between repellents, if you didn't get that from what I was just saying. So not all formulations are equal in repelling. So we have things that are gels, there's oils, there's aerosols, and there are going to be varying efficacies or how well they work with different mosquito species, as well as, you know, activity level and where you're going and that sort of thing. So resources, we do have lots of different mosquito publications. You can find any of those resources at the AgriLife Extension book source. And then if you need my contact information, there I am. I am more than happy to answer questions. So you can shoot me an email if you need links to anything or you need publications, let me know. All right, so that's all I have. I tried to leave plenty of time for questions because I know there are usually lots of questions about mosquitoes.
Awesome. Thank you, Wizzie. There's so much good information in there. I was amazed to know that there are 3,000 different species of mosquito worldwide. That to me is a huge number. It's just crazy.
Kind of daunting.
So yeah, we do have several questions here in the Q&A, and for everybody else in the audience here, if you have questions, go ahead and start populating them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in the order that they were received. So first I got here is, does water motion, like sprinkling, stop the mosquitoes from surviving in, say, ponds or water features?
It really depends on how much you have and how much of the surface is covered. So if it's just a water feature, like a kind of a small fountain in the middle of a large pond, the edges can possibly have eggs in that area laid down, and then they can hatch out from there. So it really would depend on the particular setup. Usually when I'm saying moving water, it's kind of a flowing thing. They're not going to be in a flowing creek or something like that. They're going to be in more standing water locations, but that can be a smaller area of a larger body of water.
Okay. Next we have, says there's a trend with new development to plant clumping bamboo, and they have read that mosquitoes actually breed inside the bamboo itself. Is this true?
I do not know that for sure. I have not seen any research on that, but just going from what I know, if there is a way for them to get in there and they have water or something in there, then yeah, they're going to take advantage of whatever space they can.
Cool. This next one's an interesting question. It says, if I have dark skin, should I use darker colors as to not create contrast, or is the contrast coming from something else as opposed to clothing?
Huh. That would be like a super cool study. I don't know, but that would be a really good thing to look at. I hold on, I'm writing that down. I don't know if that's ever been looked at, but that is a super cool question. I would think that if you are wearing light colored clothing and you have long sleeves and long pants, that's usually the kicker for us here in Texas because it's so hot and you don't want to wear long sleeves and long pants. But if you were wearing that, then, you know, still stick with the light colored clothing because then that would be the majority of what they're seeing. But if you're just wearing light colored, like short sleeves, short pants, then I would probably go with a darker, loose fitting. That way there's not the contrast. But, oh, that is a great question.
We'll have to figure out that who that was and credit them if you publish on that.
That is so interesting.
This next one is a question that I had and someone else populated in the Q&A as well. It says the mosquito spraying companies, even those quoted as being safe or natural, use harmful chemicals to other beneficial insects. They said they found dead bees in the summer each week in their pollinator garden. Is there a solution to this issue?
Is there a solution? Yes and no. I mean, the solution would be to not use a broad spectrum product for mosquito control in those areas that are being used by pollinators. But if it's, you know, somebody else's land, you really can't tell them what to do on their property. Even though something may be naturally derived, because a lot of those products, they could be something like pyrethrins, which is from a plant. It is a plant-derived product. It's still a broad spectrum, and it's going to kill whatever insect comes into contact with it. And that could be a bee, it could be a mosquito, it could be a butterfly. So usually when we're doing mosquito control, like on a professional level, and I'm not talking like professional, I'm talking like mosquito control districts, they are really trying to monitor and target areas where we have standing water and focus on that because we get a one-stop shop for 3 of the life stages, and it's going to be easier to control that because it's contained. Whereas if you're trying to control the adult mosquitoes that are flying around, then it gets more difficult because they move. But even then, if I used to live in Houston, and they have an amazing mosquito control district in Houston, but they sometimes would come and spray, but they would do it in the evening or after the sun went down. That way they're not targeting those pollinators. And so they're giving that product time to kill the mosquitoes that are active then, but they are also allowing that product to kind of dissipate by the time that those pollinators would become active again or dry. I don't know if that completely answered that question.
It's a tough subject to deal with, so.
Yes, it certainly is. I mean, because everybody's going to have varying concerns. I mean, there are some people that are more concerned about killing the mosquitoes so they don't have that possible disease transmission. But there are other people that are more concerned about pesticide usage and effect of non-target organisms. And, you know, it's just one of those, you know, communication is really important, and, you know, maybe talking to people about them, I mean, and not accusing them, but, you know, explaining to them, you know, this can also kill other things, and that could be a problem. And, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we just need to kind of find ways to compromise sometimes.
Okay, this next question came up a couple of times, and then it rolled into another question that was asked, so I'm going to ask them both at the same time.
Okay.
What diseases are prevalent in our local mosquito populations? And then do only certain species carry the heartworms for pets?
Yes, only certain species carry the heartworms. I cannot remember what it is right now, but I could certainly look that information up. And probably the most well, I wouldn't want to say most common, the most known, the one that is monitored the most in our area is certainly West Nile virus. And we do have it, it's monitored by various health organizations around the state. And they are, looking at mosquito pools and testing those to see if they're West Nile virus positive. And a lot of that is going to direct the mosquito control programs in those areas. So I would say that one is probably the one that most people are concerned with. But, we have had, obviously Zika a couple years ago was getting a lot of press. So that was found in areas. And, I'm thinking it's not just going to go away. Like once it's here, then, it's possible that we can have that come back in our population. And, it really depends on what area of Texas you're in, but I would say Central Texas, the one that they're most concerned with and monitoring is West Nile virus. And if you want, I can look up the heartworm mosquito.
This next one's pretty interesting. And are you aware, does blood type play into effect at all whether or not mosquitoes bite you?
From research that I've looked at, it is not blood type necessarily, but the researchers do think that there is some genetic component that makes some people more susceptible for, well, I don't know, more attractive, I guess would be a better word, to being bitten by mosquitoes than other people, but they haven't really pinpointed what it is exactly. But there are some people, I am one of those people, that it's like mosquitoes love and they flock to me. But I could be sitting out there and my neighbor, she's like, oh, you're having a problem? I'm like, you haven't been bitten? I have like 30 mosquito bites. What's going on? So yes, there is something, but I do not know exactly what particular component. Maybe that's something that 23andMe can pick up at some point and they can do a test on that.
That'd be awesome. Okay, so other than pollinating, what other benefits do mosquitoes provide?
They definitely fit into ecosystems. I mean, it's one of those, they are a food source for other animals, definitely different insects that are like dragonfly larvae and stuff like that. They'll eat the stuff that is in the water. There's birds, there's lizards. It's just, they fit into ecosystems as food. So they are, not completely all bad. It's kind of like fire ants, you got to kind of find the way that they're good, but they do some stuff.
Yep,
okay,
sure.
So dog heartworm is transmitted by the ones that we have here in Texas are the Aedes and the Anopheles mosquitoes.
So the guys that are around all day long, the Aedes.
Yes, pretty much. The black and white ones are the Aedes, yeah. So that's why it's really, really important to have your animals on heartworm. And just in case you guys don't know, I'm not a veterinarian, but cats can also get heartworm and there isn't any treatment for them. So that is something that if you have outdoor cats that you might want to think about getting like a topical that will take care of the mosquitoes and the fleas and the ticks.
Right, this next one was asked a couple of times and it's also maybe two questions in one here, is how long do they live, like, and how many times can the females bite, since they're the ones getting the blood and biting? That was asked several times. And then also, since females only mate once, but the males mate multiple times, Does it mean that there are many fewer males hatched than females, or how does that work?
I am going to say I don't know how the male to female ratio on mosquitoes on hatching. But when we're dealing with females and just like mating in general, so the females are going to release a chemical cue to attract in the males, and the males essentially have to go find the females so they can mate with them. So they are trying to essentially spread their genetic material around as much as they possibly can. But it may be that they get eaten before the females are even found. It's one of those, and that's pretty much with any insect. I mean, there's always the option that they don't get to mate with anybody, or they get ousted by some other. I mean, there's crazy stuff that goes on in the insect world when we're talking about mating. So I don't know the exact ratio of males to females that emerge. The other question, I'm sorry, could you repeat the other question? I know there was another one about mating.
How many times can the females bite? Is it more than once?
Yes, they can bite. So it depends on if they have a complete blood meal and how full they get from that. So if you see a mosquito and it's biting you and it hasn't completely engorged yet, and you shoo it away, or you try to kill it and you miss, then it's going to go find something else to feed on until it is completely engorged. And it can feed on, multiple things until it gets engorged. And then it's going to develop that batch of eggs, and it's going to lay them, and then it will need another blood meal so it can create another batch of eggs. And then again, so it really depends on how long it's on somebody feeding before it gets disturbed and whatnot, as to how many things it might feed on. And some mosquitoes, it depends. They're multiple host mosquitoes, so it may be that they feed on birds at one point, and then they go feed someplace else. Mosquitoes are crazy.
Okay. This next one says, so Florida is introducing genetically engineered mosquitoes. Mm-hmm. Any word of will Texas be doing that?
I have not heard of anything in Texas. Usually those programs are run through governmental agencies because they're regulated. But yeah, usually what they're doing is, or what they are doing in the Florida one, is they are releasing genetically modified males that are sterile. And so they're planning on flooding the population with these sterile males. And so their hope is that the sterile males are going to go out there and mate with a whole bunch of the female mosquitoes, and then those female mosquitoes are not going to be able to lay eggs. And so it's going to reduce the population. I haven't heard of anything about us doing that in Texas. But we have done similar programs in the past. We did that for screwworm. They were irradiated males that we released. So they were sterile males, and they actually got rid of the screwworms.
All right, next up, and this one's important for all of our gardeners because I think mulching is very common around here, but it says, so all the oak leaf litter that I have as mulch is a bad thing as far as mosquitoes go for breeding purposes, and just maybe mulch in general?
It depends on how wet it stays. I also leave my oak leaves on the ground for mulching purposes, and then if I add mulch, I just put it on top of it because that's great organic matter. If you are covering it up and you don't actually have like low-lying areas where you have actual standing water, then it's really not going to be too much of an issue. Those mosquitoes are going to go someplace else. And as far as the adult mosquitoes, they may go down there, but that's not really their ideal habitat. They're more into thick kind of vegetation and stuff. If you had ground cover, like the what's that stuff? The Asian jasmine or whatever, I think, that people plant and it just goes crazy. Those are going to be great habitats for mosquito because it's really thick vegetation. It's going to hold in that moisture and the humidity and the heat and all that stuff.
Okay. This next one, I'm not sure how far we can go on it because we typically don't talk about specific companies, but they're asking, do the mosquito services like Mosquito Joe's services work?
Yes, they are going to kill mosquitoes that are in your yard. But if you remember the slide about dispersal, mosquitoes are capable of traveling over a mile to find food. So it's possible that, you know, you kill your mosquitoes, but, you know, right down the street, there's more coming. So it may be that I mean, obviously you're not living in a bubble, so it's going to be really hard to completely manage the mosquitoes that are moving in from the surrounding area. Now, if you're treating all of your vegetation and surfaces like fence surfaces and stuff like that with a pesticide, yes, it's going to kill those mosquitoes that fly in from surrounding areas, but it's also probably going to be a residual contact kill pesticide that will also kill any beneficials that land on those surfaces as well. Now, I don't know what particular products they're using, so it may be that that is not an accurate statement. But that is what I would assume if they are treating vegetation and things like that. It's gonna most likely be a contact product that has some period of time that is active. And those are usually broad spectrum pesticides.
Okay, next up we have, this one's kind of in depth. Let's see. Has research revealed any benefits from getting bit by mosquitoes? I think that might be a hard thing to study, but have you heard anything on that?
I have not heard anything on that. I don't think that I would want to sign up for that study.
Yeah, it'd be very itchy. Okay, are you familiar with the proposed method of mosquito control where a bucket is filled with water and a straw to attract pregnant females and then seeded with BTI? Does that sound effective?
A straw. Oh, straw, like hay. Okay, I'm with you. Sorry, I was completely thrown off because I'm thinking a giant bucket with a soda straw in it. Yes, but I'm with you. So yes, I am familiar. Would I recommend that as a way to control mosquitoes in your yard? Probably not. Like if you're just doing like, I'm getting a bucket from the store and putting some hay and water in it. Essentially what you're doing there is you are creating a habitat for egg-laying mosquitoes. So they're going to go for that standing water that has organic matter in it. And that's what you're adding with the straw or the hay. And then once that would be in there, you would treat it with the BTI. We're trying to get people to reduce the standing water that they have in the area, not draw more in by creating more spaces for them to lay eggs in specifically. And if you happen to miss the window that they're in there and you need to treat, then you know you have a huge population. So while I am familiar with that, I don't know that I would necessarily encourage people to manage mosquitoes in that manner. I think there are better ways to do mosquito management than bringing more into your backyard.
So in that same vein, the next question was mosquito bait traps like Spartan work, and then it said that after that Spartan uses sodium chloride, yeast, and sucrose. What it looks like.
So that particular one, I don't know if it has actually been scientifically shown to work. There are other types of mosquito traps that have been shown to capture mosquitoes in the area that use other stuff. So again, it really would depend on what trap they are utilizing. The thing that I would say, if people are going with some type of a mosquito trap, I would put it as far away from your house as you can, because a lot of those are going to have attractants to them. And so you don't want to attract the mosquitoes to your patio area. You want them to go away from the house and be attracted out there. Because, you know, if I'm buying a mosquito trap, it's going to be a gift for the neighbor, because I want the mosquitoes to go over in their yard, not mine.
Okay, so this next one's a fun question here. We always get these two. I'm gonna ask two of them. What is Wizzie's favorite insect? And then what product do you use when you're outside, since they tend to flock to you and eat you up like crazy?
My favorite insect, they are cockroaches. I love cockroaches. You know, long story, but I worked on cockroaches many years, and I have a particular fondness for them, and I think that they're amazing creatures, and I think that they're beautiful, and most people think I'm crazy, which is fine. And what do I use to as a repellent for mosquitoes? I use the Thermacell when I'm sitting outside in my driveway with a group of people, but I also will use repellent. I usually use either the DEET or the Picaridin products, because they have been well documented, showing that they actually repel mosquitoes, and they haven't been shown to really cause any human issues, as long as you are using them in the way that they are meant to be utilized. So when you're using these products, they do have product labels on them. You do need to read them and make sure that you're using them properly. And as far as the percentage that you are using, again, that is going to be dependent upon how long you're going to be outside, what you're doing in that area, and how active you're going to be. So you have to take all of that stuff into account. So I usually have various mosquito repellents in my arsenal. And I personally, just because of the way that I am with the way that, like, touching stuff, I don't like the real oily ones. So I always get the dry products to make sure that I'm not going to have that greasy feel on me, because I can't stand that.
Okay, and unfortunately, we still have several questions in the Q&A, but we're right at that hour mark. So to respect everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and call it there. You guys have our contact information and Wizzie's should you have any more questions. And then I would just like to thank you, Wizzie, for this. It was very informative, and I learned a ton. And yeah, I loved it.
Great. Thanks, y'all.